This is where everything was done, and I think we need to file an appeal before she went to rehab. Okay. Do you not need this? I have one. I didn't know you were. Okay, so you don't need this? I have it. Okay. I'll look at it. Okay. No, not because they're not paying anything. Nothing.
Good, man. How are you?
I ain't lost nothing to Texas. I love Texas. I love Texas. I hope it's awesome. They're awesome managers. Dallas Airport is scary.
Can you look in there and see if you can see me in that thing?
I can. There's the. Yeah, I can see you.
All right.
Yes, I can.
All right.
Yes.
So I'm there. So I.
Yes.
All right.
You want me to stand at the?
Yeah, stand there. All right. Yeah, that'll work. All right. Thank you.
I'm the shorter version of you.
Yes. Thank you.
You're welcome. Good. You're good. Let me see, man. Yeah, that's
All right, guys. I'm going to pass around this sign-in sheet, please. If you don't mind, give us your name and phone number and email. The purpose for the sign-in, guys, is just to keep in contact with you, and we're not going to follow you or anything like that or stalk you. Again, that was a joke. Loosen things up here tonight. Family recovery is very serious. I understand that. We'll get started here in about 2 or 3 minutes. There's more chairs right back there if you want to set those up after you shut the door. Carol Kane.
Yeah.
I need to make sure somebody reminds me to talk about Operation Rescue. Denton?
All right.
So we need to make sure we talk about Operation Rescue before the group's over tonight. So remind me of that. If I'm not stopping toward the end, make sure somebody raises their hand and we talk about that. So we can set chairs up here. I can turn this. We can turn this like this. Be careful you don't run into my extra sophisticated what do you want to call that? Media operation right here. I have my media operation sitting on an old cardboard box.
It works.
It works.
We're fancy up in here.
We're fancy up in here. All right, so we're going to get started, guys. And if you come in, that's okay. If you try to find a seat, I think we might be about out of chairs. But there's some in my office probably, and some of the other offices may have some as well. Real quick, to introduce myself, my name is Rich Jones. I'm the executive director here at Favor Greenville. I know a lot of faces, but I see a lot of new faces as well. My background, really quickly, I have a master's degree in sociology with a concentration in addiction studies. I have an MBA with a concentration in healthcare management. There was a period of time in my life where I thought I would work in the healthcare industry. A licensed clinical addiction specialist, a certified ARISE interventionist, a certified employee assistance professional, certified trauma therapist through EMDR Institute, certified clinical supervisor, which allows me to supervise other therapists. So that's kind of who I am academically and with my license and things like that. I'm also a person in long-term recovery. For me, it's been 16 years. I was addicted to prescription pain pills. I guess you could say in a way I was at the forefront of the opioid addiction, or excuse me, of the opioid epidemic. I was right at the beginning of it. There was no such thing as prescription monitoring programs. There was no awareness of the issue. I was in a car accident, and I never took a pain pill for pain. That's the most honest thing I can say to the group. But I got pain pills hand over fist. I never had any problems. and I never got them illegally. And I don't blame anybody for that. I don't blame the doctors or anything that I was seeing. They were just going by what I told them. And if they kind of denied my pain, I threw a fit. Well, I threw a very sophisticated fit. I dressed a certain way. I was a professional. I was on the business end of a lot of things, and so I would just kind of basically become such a pain and so persistent that they would kind of give me what I wanted. And alcohol was always an issue in my life, and I guess in my case, my exposure to these pain pills was sort of a blessing in disguise, believe it or not, because it brought me to my knees a lot sooner than I think alcohol would have. We talk a lot, and I want to talk about this before we get started tonight. In our culture today, we talk a lot about the opioid epidemic. We talk a lot about overdoses, and we make a big deal about that for good reason. 60,000 folks will die of an overdose, or died of an overdose in 2016, 60,000 plus. But I don't know if you know this or not, 88,000 people will die this year from alcohol-related issues, direct result of alcohol-related issues. Alcohol is the #1 substance. I often say it's no big deal. So we have to be careful. Tonight, when I talk about all these issues, when I talk about boundaries, and I talk about interventions, and I talk about how we can help or how we can't help, I want to make sure we're not just focusing too much on these substances, opioids and prescription drugs. We're talking about everything, including alcohol. So that's a little bit of who I am. Every other week we get together and we kind of have a topic. I have a topic in mind tonight, but I always like to open it up to the group and see if anybody has anything certain going on in their lives or anything that they want to make sure we talk about tonight. Does anybody have a topic that they want to cover tonight before I just go off on mine? Because if you don't, I'll just go off on mine, and then you can't complain because I gave you a chance. I was going to... Yes, ma'am.
Several weeks ago, I attended on a Wednesday night. You had Layla Massant here for a nutrition thing. She was talking about a new enzyme supplement that is very, very promising in working in the brain. And I got the book that she highly recommended, Staying Clean and Sober, but it is also about any addiction.
Yeah.
I just read the first chapter, and I am so excited about it. And I brought this with me tonight because I wanted to make sure to mention this to everybody. It is a new frontier in addiction, working with enzymes that particularly
so there's
work in the brain.
Yeah, there's a lot of work being done around how can nutrition and certain enzymes and certain supplements help a person in the recovery process, and I think there's probably a lot of legitimacy to that. The danger you run into with some of those ideas or some of those approaches is it would discard what is called like the psychosocial aspect of recovery. If you think about how does recovery work or how does addiction work, it's a biopsychosocial process. So there's a biological part which this particular approach would address. What's going on in the brain? What do I need to do different? Medication would address that as well. And then there's a psychological part. How do I take care of the cravings? How do I deal with the coping skills? How do I deal with my relationships? And then there's a social part. Biopsychosocial. Who do I spend my time with? If we focus too much on the biological part of it, then we're gonna lose out in these other areas. And we would say you have to go at it from a holistic approach in all three of those areas.
She does. I've only read the first chapter, but in the first chapter she mentions that they have found through different things that if you just do one or two, you still have a greater chance of relapse. This is a part.
It's a part of
the whole program in recovery.
Yeah, that's a real important thing because it gets real controversial in recovery, guys. If you guys have been through this with your loved ones, or if you've been through it yourself, you know this. I mean, you talk to 10 different people, they're going to tell you 10 different ways to do it, and they guarantee that their way is the way to do it. And if you do it any other way, you're doomed for failure. And at Favor Greenville, we believe in multiple pathways to recovery. Quite frankly, we want to see your life get better. We don't care how that gets done. We don't care what program you involve yourself in. But we know that there are certain factors, and the more of those factors that you engage in, the better you're going to do. And it does include some of these supplements and some of this medication. All right, so just a quick disclaimer, guys, to talk about the group. This is a mutual support group, not a therapy group, right? We're all here, you know, none of y'all are filling out any insurance. I just used y'all again. I have definitely moved to Greenville. Yep. And so none of y'all are here filling out any insurance forms. This isn't meant to replace therapy. If you're seeing a therapist, please continue to see that therapist. If you're seeing a psychiatrist, please continue to see that psychiatrist. For that matter, if you're involved in any other kind of groups, continue those. You're really dealing with, you know, one person's opinion, my professional take on this stuff based on my background, my academic background, my training, and my personal experience. Other people are going to disagree with a lot of things I say. Now, I am right, but they're entitled to their opinion. And really, it's just about a philosophy and a way of going about things. And I'm going to talk about that as we go through. But please ask questions, weigh in on your opinion, and share with each other on maybe the best way to go about some of this stuff. And above all, it's individualized. I was listening to something. If you're looking for a resource online, it's called Recovery 2.0. And I mean, I just love the way this guy goes about his business, and his philosophy lines up very, very closely with our philosophy. And he was talking about multiple pathways to recovery, and how do we find recovery, and how do we find mental health, and how do we find relief. All of us in this room are looking for relief, and we're looking with how do we deal with stress, and how do we deal with the frustrations of life. And he said, how could it be one size fits all? How could it possibly be that what works for Rich is going to work for everyone else in this room? When we're all so individualized, we all come with our own unique family background. We all come with our own cultural background. We all come with our own personalities. So the idea that there's one box that we should fit in, it doesn't even make sense logically. So when we talk about stuff tonight, we're talking about suggestions, and we're talking about ideas, but you may try out and you may find your own pathway to recovery. Ultimately, the goal of family recovery is, well, I guess one way to say it is you'd be able to sleep at night. You'd be able to go through the day without worrying all day, every day. How many people in here worry a lot? A dumb question. I understand that. You know, that you'll be able to experience some fun and some pleasure in a normal day without being completely preoccupied with what's going on with your loved one. That's the goal of family recovery. That's simple. How you get there, that may be very different for everyone in this room, the pathway you take to get there. All right. So, just going to jump through some of this stuff, guys. I'm not going to go through this word for word. This is mostly for new folks in the room. How do you know even what is a substance use disorder? Basically, you use this thing called a DSM-5, and it's a manual used to diagnose mental health issues, substance use issues. And it's interesting, the word addiction never appears in that manual. It's a substance use disorder severe would be the category. That would be what it was called. And so whatever the substance is, alcohol, marijuana, pain pills, whatever it might be, you simply go through the criteria on the right. Tolerance is it takes more and more. Withdrawal is when it's gone, you're sick. Craving, preoccupation is mental obsession with the substance. You think about it all day. Can't control. You take 1 or 2 drinks and you wind up drinking all night. Can't cut back. I'm only going to drink on the weekends, but I can't stick to that plan. Avoid non-using activities. I only go places where alcohol or drugs are involved. Interpersonal issues. People are angry with me about it. Great deal of time spent on using. That's very obvious. Use despite physically or psychologically dangerous situations. Like an example of that that's usually overlooked would be if you're depressed and you continue to smoke marijuana. That would be an example of that. Or if you have a liver problem and you continue to drink. Use in physically hazardous situations, drinking and driving. Role failure. I can't show up for work. I can't show up for school. If you meet 6 or more of those criteria in a pattern, now the pattern part of it is a little bit subjective. who's to say what's a pattern? But if you have a pattern of behavior that meets 6 or more of those criteria, you fall into what's called substance use disorder severe. And that is as close as we get to an x-ray or a diagnostic test. It's not like high blood pressure where you got certain numbers and it is what it is. This is one of the things that makes it very, very difficult in engaging people in the recovery process, because even though it might be obvious to you guys, and some of you may be dealing with this right now, a person in addiction is able to explain away these behaviors, and they're able to say that this doesn't really meet, I don't really meet those criteria. I can look at you and I can with all seriousness explain how getting another DUI really wasn't my fault, that it's the city of Greenville police are out to get me, and they follow me around and they're really, really targeting me because I'm such an important person. And I just happen to get pulled over all the time. I can explain this away in a way that works for me, and you guys will be looking at your loved one, scratching your head going, is this person even from the same planet? Is this the person I gave birth to? How many moms in here have asked themselves that question? I know that that's been said, right? Because it absolutely makes no sense. But you got to remember, when we're in the middle of that addictive process, we're not looking to make sense. We're literally living in an irrational land, and we're very comfortable with being in an irrational land. Any questions with the diagnosis or any questions about that process? That's usually done by a therapist. It's usually done a lot of times it'll be in a clinic setting, it'll be in a rehab setting. Sometimes if a person winds up in the hospital, somebody will do a version of this. Many folks don't even really know it was done. It's an assessment process where a lot of questions are asked, but I don't know that it's always kind of read back to the person, that kind of thing. But if you got a loved one in treatment, for example, at some point in time, somebody went through this with them. We don't do this with our folks a favor. We're not doing official assessments. We don't really make you fit into any kind of diagnostic criteria to get services here. If you show up, you're in. We don't kind of card you at the door and make sure that you meet the qualifications. But any questions about that? About the criteria?
I have a question.
Yes.
Do the insurance companies use that same DSM-5 criteria?
They use this DSM-5 criteria, and the insurance companies use a thing. They're supposed to use something called ASAM, the American Society of Addiction Medicine Level of Care, which goes through and based on this, along with other things, determines what level of care the person needs. And if you guys are dealing with this, there are different levels of care that your insurance company can approve. The lowest level of care would be called outpatient services. That can be one time a week. It technically can be anything up to 9 hours. That's usually approved of pretty readily. That's not that difficult to get approved of. The next level of care after that is called intensive outpatient. That's usually 9 hours or more per week of counseling. Usually groups, 3 hours at a time, kind of 3 times a week. That's a little harder to get, but you're still generally going to get that. One level above that is called partial hospitalization, or PHP. Now you're getting into some areas where they like to deny services. Insurance companies are going to deny services. Insurance companies really aren't supposed to deny services. They're going to deny PHP level, and they're going to deny inpatient residential level. And I would encourage you guys to push back every opportunity you get. This is a good topic and something for you to be aware of. I would ask for appeals, and then I would want to appeal it to the person above that person, and I would want to appeal it to an external doctor. And, you know, if we don't start pushing back on the insurance companies, they're going to keep denying services. That's their goal, to hold down cost. Yes, Karen?
What do you do if a facility is not on a approved list?
So you can be in network or out of network. That's what this is called. So it's in network or out of network. And if you're out of network, you can ask the facility to help you file the claim. They have to submit some paperwork. They have to submit assessments and things like that. So you want to get the facility to help you file that out of network claim. And then the check would come directly to you for reimbursement if you paid the facility up front. How it works typically, guys, in private facilities, so if I were to go somewhere tonight, I needed to go to rehab, I would get on the phone with somebody, I would give them my information. If it's an out-of-network, I would come in, I would pay, here's your check for $30,000, $40,000, whatever it is, and then after some time, I file the claim and I get a check back.
Why isn't Medicare won't
No, the reason substance use disorders aren't reimbursed, guys, is because of the stigma surrounding substance use disorders. Because for decades and decades, all of our institutions have they've just got away with treating addicts and alcoholics however they choose. So you deny services, it's not covered because, I think because none of us would ever say anything about it because we were embarrassed. Who was really going to go rail against Medicare? I'm talking in the past. I think it's changing now, but who was going to rail against Medicare about I'm an alcoholic and they denied me help? Does that make sense? It's very embarrassing to say out loud, so I'm just going to keep my mouth shut and pay my bill.
The thing I came up against was that out of network, my husband's on Medicare, the facility wouldn't even help me.
They wouldn't even follow. They wouldn't file. I can't speak to that. I can't speak to why any individual facility wouldn't deal with that. I think, guys, if you've gone through this, you know this to be the case. You have got to become an aggressive advocate for yourself when it comes to these issues. They're going to take advantage of us. The rinse and repeat model is what it is, and they're going to take advantage unless we push back. And by we, I mean those of us in recovery, those of us who are supporting people in recovery. We got to ask a lot of questions. We got to file appeals. We got to file another appeal. The one thing that the insurance company will do is they'll have you appeal to their own doctor. So you follow me? So Rich gets denied, and then the appeal goes to a doctor that works for Blue Cross Blue Shield. So to me, I would make an argument that doctor probably has a biased opinion. And apparently, if you go one level above that, you can get to an external person. But you really got to push. You really got to push back. Ask a bunch of questions. You got to become, what would it be? You got to become the squeaky wheel, right? The squeaky wheel gets the grease. That's a cliche, right? Am I getting that right? Okay, I'm never sure about those. Any other questions or comments about this process of diagnosis? Kathy?
Well, I just had a comment. Medicare will pay for hospice, but they won't pay for rehab.
Right.
I mean, they'll put you up.
The comment was Medicare will pay for hospice, but they won't pay for rehab. And absolutely. The coverage around substance use disorders has to change. The whole approach has to change. All right. So we have a framework for what is addiction to the best of our ability. Now, none of us can look at another person, and it's not like diagnosing a broken leg where I can show you an x-ray and say, without question, you have addiction. It's not that clear cut, but do you feel like you have a general idea of what kind of falls into that category and what doesn't? The next question is, what about the recovery process? Because what you're going to do in family recovery has a lot to do with where you're at in the recovery process. So basically, you have different areas. Active addiction is your loved one is still actively using. And I don't know how many folks are sitting here tonight with that being the situation. This is somebody who's actively using substances, and you're probably not really thinking about how do I take care of myself. You're probably thinking, how do I get this person to stop? And I don't know if anyone's in here willing to share that, but am I getting that right? You're not necessarily here tonight saying, how do I take care of myself? You're here because you're worried. And you're worried, you're probably deeply concerned because they're actively using. That's different than a person being in recovery. If the person's in a recovery process, it's a little easier for you to work on yourself, right? So the key is, can you do anything to get the person into the recovery process? Or can you try to detach? How many people have heard the word detach? I think it's an overrated word. I think it's one of those things we tell people to do, like let go and let God. I remember I'd be in recovery, they'd be like, let go and let God. I'd be like, well, what does that mean? And they'd be like, well, just let go and let God, man. And I'd be like, what? Are you, how? Joe, you just got to let it go, dude. Wow, man, okay. I'm still not really sure exactly what that means. So if you're in that part of the process, that's going to take some work, and that's going to take some exploration. And I want to talk for a little bit about what you can do if you feel like you're in active addiction or crisis. And I got to make sure people are aware of this, because today someone shared with me that they didn't know that they could do this in South Carolina. Do you know in South Carolina you can file commitment papers for substance use? You can file commitment papers and have somebody picked up and taken to the emergency room for an evaluation, for an official evaluation, if you can document that they're a danger to themselves due to their using. It doesn't. They don't even have to be saying, "I want to kill myself." Most people know that there's mental health commitment papers, right? I want to kill myself or kill someone else. There's also substance use papers, literally pink papers. That's what you ask for if you go to the mental health department. Can I get the pink papers? The blue papers are for mental health. So any questions about the commitment process? Any questions about that part of it?
Is that the same as the Baker Act?
That's the Baker Act in Florida, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's exactly right, except it's not as extensive as the Baker Act. The Baker Act is actually probably a little bit more effective or a little bit longer term. This really only guarantees that your loved one's going to get picked up and taken to an institution to get evaluated.
So don't remove their rights.
It doesn't remove their rights. If they go to the institution and they present and they say, "Yeah, mom's overreacting. I'm not really drinking like that," then they're going to walk.
Okay.
You know. So, but it can get them evaluated. It may be it's very effective if you have somebody who's been going to the hospital over and over again, that kind of thing. You got to remember, with all this stuff, you got to document it. You got to be able to go in and say it. It has to be firsthand knowledge. So, if Carol tells me that her daughter's doing something, I can't file the papers. It's got to be somebody who sees it. Or if Carol's daughter's boyfriend tells her something's going on, you got to actually go over to the house and try to see something happening. But there are commitment papers for substance use disorders. This is very important. Somebody told me they didn't know this. Somebody who I was sure knew this. Everyone in this room, all 65 of you, you know this now. There are substance use. If you have somebody who is out of control, if you have somebody who you are literally concerned for their life. Now, this isn't somebody who had a bad night. Don't go home tonight and just start committing the hell out of people. That's not that's not the purpose of this. That's not at all what the purpose of this is. This is somebody, it's got to be pretty serious, and you got to remember, all they're going to do is get evaluated, and it may not stick. So you want to make sure that you're getting this really, really documented. It has to be a pretty serious situation. But any questions about that?
What happens after they're evaluated?
So if they go and they're evaluated, they'll typically be admitted for 72 hours. And then depending on what goes on during that 72 hours, they may wind up staying longer, or a lot of times they're released. But the idea is, if you really truly have somebody that you're concerned is killing themselves via drinking, let's just use that example, that 72 hours could give you a chance to have a reasonable conversation with them. You know, you could get into the hospital, and then you could maybe do an intervention from the hospital, for example. It's really only meant to stop the bleeding right there in the moment. It's a great question. What happens is a great question, because it is not a long-term solution by any means. And I think a lot of folks are reluctant to do commitments because they feel like they're swinging for the fences, and if it doesn't work, so-and-so is going to be really, really angry. And, you know, they're never going to talk to me again, and I'm not going to be able to help them. I'm never going to see them again. So I think those are some of the things that keep people from acting on this. But I do want everyone to know it's an option. Yes, sir.
How does this reconcile or fit in with an intervention?
How does what?
What you're talking about now,
The commitment?
yeah, how does that reconcile? How can that lead to an intervention?
Well, a lot of times, so the question is, how does a commitment integrate with an intervention? A lot of times, an intervention will be done in lieu of a commitment, before a commitment, and to tell you the truth, the commitment is maybe one of the bottom lines that are talked about in the intervention. So, for example, you're doing an intervention on Rich, you guys are in the room, and you're saying to him something along the lines, we want you to go get help today, and if you're not going to go get help, then we're going to go forward with this commitment process. And the commitment is a little bit different. I mean, the police are coming by, and an ambulance is coming by. And sometimes the person would rather go get help themselves than go through the commitment process. Does that make sense? And then the other thing that has happened, and this has happened quite a bit at Favor, if a person gets into the hospital, then you're able to do an intervention almost at the hospital. You got to remember, when a person's in active addiction, You guys have dealt with this. You've seen this. You've looked at your loved one and you've witnessed this firsthand. You're 100% irrational when you're in active addiction. Agreed? You know, you're talking, you're literally not thinking through. Everything's driven from, you know, your midbrain and your emotions, and, you know, the ability to deny reality is stunning sometimes. I can look you in the eye and I can tell you 2 + 2 = 18. And if you give me enough time, I will convince you that 2 + 2 = 18. Because you know what? This is the last Monday of the month, and on the last Monday of the month, you actually multiply it by 20 and subtract 9, because that was back in the Aztec Mayan calendar days, and we're all going to die in 2020 anyway, so let me just go get high. Now you guys are all looking at me like that was a very logical stream of consciousness right there. So you're saying to yourself, how do I have a rational conversation with an irrational person? How do I do that? That's like I don't speak any French, but I'm going to try to have a conversation with somebody who only speaks French. Well, maybe you got to get them to a facility where they can take a deep breath, they can clear up for a minute, because you can kind of clear up enough in 72 hours where you might be able to have a conversation. That would be one of the other reasons to do it. And then maybe you can have an intervention. Sometimes it does stretch, guys. Actually, probably a lot of times it stretches beyond 72 hours, and it can get closer to a week in some of these cases. What other questions about commitments? What other questions? Yes?
How did you do one that was out of state?
So you'd have to call that state, and you'd have to figure out, like in Florida, it's called the Baker Act. You'd have to do a bunch of research. You know, you can also do, in probably every state, there's probably some type of well check where you can send the police over to check on somebody, that kind of thing. But I can tell you how to do one in South Carolina, and I can tell you how to do one in Pennsylvania. But if you want to commit somebody in Pennsylvania, we'll hang out afterward. We'll just do it for the fun of it. It's called a 302. I'm going to commit my brother. I'm on Facebook. Tell him I'm coming for him tonight. You know, and again, you kind of go through the process, and it has to be serious, and you have to be able to document that it's serious, and you're going to have to be willing to. It may make the person angry at you, right? I mean, they're probably not going to be real happy with the fact that the police came over or an ambulance came over. So you have to be fully prepared to deal with that whole thing that's going to go down. It's not going to go down. It's not going to be fun. And I think that's probably what keeps some people from doing it. What other questions about the commitment process? Yes?
Who makes the decision whether they can?
A probate judge. Actually, a psychiatrist does on site at the hospital. But then ultimately, if you're going to stay past 3 days, there has to be a probate judge involved. I mean, it has to do with civil rights, right? We don't want people just to be able to be committed willy-nilly. One of the very controversial things that's going on in Pennsylvania is they're trying to be able to change this where we can commit people for 30 days. You can commit people for 30 days to treatment. What do you guys think about that? Is that a good idea or a bad idea? Anybody have an opinion on that?
Does it not depend
I
on the
think
person?
if there's history, if there's enough history to back
Yeah.
it up, I can see that for sure.
Yeah, I think you got to really make it tight on how you commit some people, because I could see, I mean, I made my brother-in-law mad, and the next thing you know, I'm up in Western Psychiatric Institute and Clinic. I mean, I'm not sure if I want to go for that. So you'd have to make sure it's tight. All right, so that's commitment idea. Let me say one other thing. Calling 911 and getting emergency services involved. We had this conversation today as well. There are some cases where there are no other options, where you have got to call emergency services, even if you think they're going to do nothing, even if you think they're going to get there and they're going to leave after they get there. If you feel like you're in danger, guys, you know, unfortunately, and I am in no way being sarcastic when I say this, unfortunately, addiction brings out the worst in people, and it can make people aggressive, and it can make people do things that they normally wouldn't do. If your loved one is threatening you or punching holes in the wall or throwing things at you, you got to call the police. You have got to call the police. And, you know, that's for their good and for your good. There's nothing that a crisis on-call line can do. There's There is no mobile crisis available in Greenville County. So basically, you got to use the services that are available. So if somebody's in a dangerous situation, that's really the only options that you have. Do you have any questions? Yes, sir.
One thing on that, this is in Greenville City, but not to the extent in Greenville County. When you call 911, you ask for a CIT officer. That's a crisis intervention trained officer.
Yeah.
And they are more liable to be able to handle a situation, particularly without shooting anybody.
Yeah. Look, the Greenville City Police are freaking awesome. I'm telling you, they're partnering with us on this Project Rescue that I'm talking about. They're CIT trained. CIT stands for Crisis Intervention Training. The state, the whole state has to be CIT trained now. That's a bill that was passed. And what that is they give officers a little bit of mental health training, enough mental health training that they can deal with some of these situations. But you can't put yourself in, I'm going to talk a lot about boundaries tonight, and I'm going to talk about being patient with the process, and I'm going to talk about there's not a one-size-fits-all solution, and you don't have to kick the bum out. You get me? I'm going to encourage you to use your head, but I do not want you to put yourself in dangerous situations. You can't put yourself in dangerous situations. People will do things in the heat of the moment whenever they're drinking or using drugs that they could regret for the rest of their lives. So calling the authorities. And if you have to call the authorities multiple times, then you have to. Yes?
We had to call the police on our son one time, and it was amazing how quickly he sobered up.
Yes, and a lot of times it can be the, do you guys hear the comment? We had to call the police one time, and it's amazing how quickly he sobered up. Sometimes it can be the catalyst to kind of push somebody toward change as well. Absolutely. But I'm really thinking of it more about you guys protecting yourselves. You guys protecting yourselves. Any comments about that process? Yes?
Yeah, I was under the, I had a crisis recently and I needed to call 911 for out of state. So I would encourage anyone that has someone out of state that might be threatening to harm themselves to right now find out how you make that phone call.
Do a little research.
Do a little research. Google it right now and find out the number, because when you're in the middle of it, you're not thinking well, and you can't just dial 911. It won't help you. You can't just dial the area code of 911. It won't help you.
Yeah.
You need to have that now. And another thing is have the number of someone else there that you can call.
So doing a little bit of legwork up front before the crisis hits might be a smart thing to do, and that may apply to a lot of folks in here. Especially we live in a day and age where people go away to treatment quite a bit. They leave the state that they're in and they wind up in other places for treatment. And having a plan, who can I call if this goes down? You know, whether that's a therapist, a case manager, or a friend even, and also what are the local authorities in that area? Who do we contact? Who are the local authorities in that area? That's very important. What other thoughts about the police or EMS or any of the first responders? All right, so the next option, you're trying to figure this out. This is whenever the crisis is going on. The next thing you can ask yourself, so the first thing is, do I need to do anything tonight? Is it dangerous? The second thing is, do I want to do an intervention? Interventions are very, very interesting. I had a practice where I did interventions, and they're super staff intensive, right? They take some time. They take some prep time. We don't really have an intervention team in the classic sense where we do what you guys are probably used to as interventions. You guys, how many people see the TV show Intervention? Yeah, I think that TV show sucks. I think it exploits drug addicts. I think it follows you around with a camera, makes the situation look horrible, and those interventions where you walk in and it's a surprise, that kind of thing, we don't do those type of interventions. Any intervention that we do, the person's going to be aware that we're working with the family. It's called invitational intervention process. And we don't do very many of those. We train the family up and encourage the family to have the conversations, and it's almost like the family becomes interventionists themselves. But we can help you with this. You just have to make sure that you're ready to have the tough conversations. You can't do an intervention unless you're 100% sure that you're ready to set the boundaries, or what used to be called bottom lines, or are called bottom lines. You guys know what I mean by bottom lines? If you don't do A, B, C, or D, here's what's going to happen to you. F, E, F, G, right? So if you don't go to rehab, Rich, you can no longer live at the house. If you don't go to rehab, Rich, we're no longer going to pay for your college tuition. Do you guys follow that? You can't do an intervention unless you're definitely sure you can do the backup part. And I think that you got to spend some time talking to yourself and talking to your spouse and talking to whoever else is involved in the family, and make sure you're ready to do that back part before you actually even test these waters. And I don't judge anybody who's not ready to do the back part. I get that. I get that, because that's where all the scary conversations occur. That's where you start playing the scenarios in your mind. Well, what's going to happen if we do have to kick him out? Where's he going to go? Oh, he's going to go down the street to that loser's house and sleep on the couch. And that guy, and then all they're going to ever eat is macaroni and cheese. I don't know why I'm saying that. I have no idea what that has to do with anything. That's what I always ate when I wound up at losers' houses. Sorry, it's been a long day. So you have to make sure that you want to follow through on whatever it is you say. It's better to not say anything at all than it is to make an empty threat. Would you agree with that? Yes. If you make an empty threat, basically the person is left with this idea of mom, dad, husband, wife. They don't really mean anything they say anyway. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to keep doing that. I'm going to go do that again. And then they're going to tell me I can't do that, or I have to leave, and I'm going to go do it again. And I'm going to go do it again, and I'm going to go do it again. So any questions about bottom lines, or any questions about the intervention process? Or comments? All right. If you're looking for any kind of support around interventions with us, if you go to our website, you can enroll directly in our consultation process by hitting this link right here. And this will get you signed up, and you'll hear from a person named Lisa. She'll give you a call and just really kind of talk you through whether or not you really want to do that, whether or not you're really there to kind of like take that next step. And the questions she'll ask: who else is on the team? You got to have more than one person to do an intervention. Remember that. You can't really do an intervention. If you only have you, that's a conversation, not an intervention. You got to have two. It'd be better if you could have 4 or 5. When it comes to who can be on the intervention team, I mean, you can think, it doesn't have to be all family. It could be girlfriend, it could be friends, it could be employers. You can get other folks on the and then you have to be sure of what you're asking the person to do as well. I want you to go to rehab, I want you to go to meetings, I want you to go over to favor, whatever it is you want them to do. You got to plan all this out ahead of time. Any questions about our intervention process or the intervention process in general? All right. So the way we see it, there's basically 2 things that you need to do family recovery. One is be able to set boundaries, and 2 is be able to manage stress. Would you guys agree? There's not much more involved than that. Now, there's a lot to managing stress, for example, and there's a lot to setting boundaries. But if you want to know what family recovery is, it really is this simple. How do I manage the way that I want to be treated? How do I manage boundaries? How do I manage my relationship? And how do I manage stress? How do I deal with the worry? How do I deal with the concern? How do I deal with the financial stress that comes with it? Everything involved in that. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about boundaries. A boundary is not... One of the things about boundaries where it gets really, really confusing, it's not necessarily meant to control another person's behavior. A boundary is meant to define how you want to be treated, not necessarily define how Rich is going to behave or how your loved one is going to behave. And I know it sounds like that's the same thing, but there's a huge difference between the 2 things. You're really looking to define what's okay for you. You're not trying to control another person's behavior, because we know how it goes when you try to control other people's behavior, right? How many people in here, by show of hands, are control freaks? Oh, you don't have to put your hand up. I know y'all are. Those of you who didn't raise your hand, not only are you control freaks, you're in denial. It's okay though. It's okay. We've all been there. You know, so let's just use an example of how this would play out. And it's a very simple example, and it's sort of like a play on words, or it's just a different way of saying the same thing. But I think that there's a subtle but powerful difference. If I have my 22-year-old son come back from college, let's say he's run into some troubles, and his grades aren't where he needed them to be. I'm not sure whether he's using drugs or not. I think he might be partying too much, but we're not sure. So he's going to come live with me. And he comes and he isn't observing any kind of curfew. Or actually, there is no curfew, but he's out all night. And I can't really go to sleep until he comes in. And so there's one of two ways to handle that. I can try to control him, and I can say to him, you got to be in by midnight every night. That's the rule. That's the curfew. That's our instincts. That's what we usually would say. Another way to say that is, I can't sleep until you're in. So what I need you to be in by midnight as long as you're living here, not because I'm trying to control you, but because I can't sleep until you're in. Do you see the difference between the two things? One thing is about me. One thing's about me. It's not about the young person. The other thing is about the kid. And for him, you're never going to have him. How do I want to say this? The night just gets started at 1 a.m. Like coming in, I've had people say to me, Rich, is 2 a.m. a reasonable curfew? Well, it is for me. 10 p.m. is a reasonable curfew for me. But is 2 a.m. a reasonable curfew for a 21-year-old? Not really. I mean, they're probably still going. Maybe 1 a.m., maybe 2 a.m., maybe 3 a.m. That's the point is, what do you need it to be for you in your house? And that's how you want to think about these situations. Another example, drinking. Oh, Mom, oh, Dad, I don't have a problem with alcohol anyway. It's no big deal. My problem was with pills. I used to have a problem with pills. I can drink, no problem. But you've been educated about addiction, and you've been educated about what it does to the brain, and so you're concerned. You don't want him drinking at your house because you don't want to contribute to that. So you could say, you can't drink. You cannot drink at all. You can't drink at our house. Or you could say, I can't have you drinking around me because it creates too much anxiety in me. Again, it sounds like it's the same thing, but do you see how you're always trying to change it back to what do you need, not trying to control their behavior? Because I would make an argument that trying to control their behavior is a losing battle. Would anyone want to comment on that?
Amen.
Amen. I mean, you can... My experience with teenagers, my own and others that I've worked with along the way, is there is a percentage, and it seems to be a relatively stable percentage, and it's happened over time, and I think it's all generations, that are rule followers. There really are rule followers. They will fall in line. They will do what they need to do. Then I don't know that I've ever seen anyone successfully talk a rebel into following rules. I just haven't ever seen it happen. I've seen people get, kind of like coerced and punished for a long enough period of time where they fell in reluctantly. You have to, believe it or not, you have to reason with them. You have to do a dance rather than just trying to put your thumb down, because I think if you put your thumb down, the person's going to wiggle away. And I would say this isn't just 18-year-olds either. This is also, 16 to 40, whatever it is. And this is also what it was probably like whenever my wife was dealing with me and I was in my addiction. There are some of us that are just not going to respond to just say no. Because we're going to say, just say yes. And then you're going to say no. Say no. It's dangerous. And I'm going to explain to you how it's not really dangerous for me, because those folks over there that got themselves in trouble, they were just stupid and they weren't doing it the right way, and you don't understand. That's not going to happen to me. And you guys have probably had conversations with people in those situations. So this idea of always trying to basically come from an angle of this is what I need. These are the boundaries. If you're going to live in our house and I'm going to be in a relationship with you, this is how I need it to be for my own peace of mind. No one can look at you and tell you how you feel. Do you follow that? I have no right to look at you and say, you shouldn't feel that way. You shouldn't worry about me at night. Now, I can look at you and say, 2 o'clock in the morning is crazy. Johnny's mom and dad let him out till 4 o'clock in the morning. I can argue that type of stuff, but no one has a right to tell you what you feel. They may try, but do you see how there's no legitimacy to that? It's an internal process. It's an internal experience for you. No one can tell you, like, oh, you don't feel that way. You're not worried about me. That kind of thing. So what comments or questions or thoughts about this part of boundary setting? If you've ever been caught in a situation, how many people in here have been caught in a situation where they've tried writing a contract for somebody? Okay, contracts. Stay away from contracts. Or if you do a contract, have it be like 2 or 3 things at the most. I've seen contracts that look like the Constitution of the United States. You know, has to do with everything from what time do you need to come in to, you know, making your bed in the morning to putting your toothbrush away, and all you're doing then is you're setting yourself up for all kinds of conflict, all kinds of arguments. If you're going to do a contract, you're going to talk about formal boundaries when somebody's coming out of treatment. Anybody have any suggestions on what you focus on? Anybody have any suggestions on the biggies? Well, recovery activities. So this is an interesting one, and I think it's a very important one, especially if your loved one's in treatment, because they're going to come out and they're going to try to tell you that there's an aftercare plan. What are your boundaries around the recovery activities? And try to be, you know, as specific as you can about that, but also not necessarily so detail oriented that it sets yourself up. Yes.
I think at first you definitely need to make sure they're not with old friends, even though their friends are supporting them, their friends want them sober. Still just being with them and staying away from old places, at least at the early beginning stages.
So a suggestion that you're making, and you're a person in recovery, is, you know, some type of expectations around about who you spend your time with and who we're okay that you're spending your time with. And if you're saying that, what you're saying is that we can't be part of the process of just watching you self-destruct and hang out with these old friends. Again, I think it's important how you say it. It isn't about trying to control anybody, but it's, look, we just learned all about this. We've been going to Favors Family Group. We went to the treatment center's family recovery group, and they all say the same thing: stay away from people, places, and things. So as your mom and dad, I'm not going to be stupid about this and be okay with it. You know, it's just, I'm not going to be able to live with myself if I don't say anything about that. So staying away from people, places, and things. Going to meetings would be another one. Now that's an area where I've had people who were told by treatment centers that if they don't go to 90 meetings in 90 days, that they were destined to get high or get drunk. I don't believe that. You don't have to get like that. You don't have to go down that road. There's not truth to that, but you do need to be involved in meetings. So that would be an area. Maybe a therapist. You would want to be talking about that. So recovery would be a big part of it. Most people have some type of conversation around whether, you know, you can't drink in my house, you can't use in my house. That would be a part of it. Some folks have boundaries or expectations around jobs. I think after the recovery part, go to meetings and don't drink or use, I honestly think it's wide open for interpretation. It's very individualized. It's where you guys are at in your own process. But you probably should think about that depending on what you're dealing with. Do you have an expectation that so-and-so needs to get a job, or are you just okay with the fact that they're going to meetings and they're getting better from using? Does anybody have any thoughts about that? Should they? Go ahead.
This is fairly new to us, but we've seen so much progress and beyond expectation what we've heard from what other people have said, and we feel like our plan right now, with our daughter, is really above and beyond what we could.
You feel like she's doing well.
I feel like she's doing 300% better just in total way of life.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're comfortable with where you're at right now,
yeah,
and you don't feel. Yeah.
And we're both.
Yep.
I can't speak for her, but I mean, we've sat down and we've gone through things and reasoned them out, and just really in a month or two, I mean, we really are trying to stay on our own plan that we've
That's good.
talked about.
That's good.
And,
What you'll find is you usually see like people go through stages, and I can't say that this is exactly how it unfolds for everyone. A lot of it has to do with how old you are, how old the person is, what stage of life they're in. Are they married? Are they not married? Those type of things. But frequently there is a focus in early recovery on just do the recovery thing, man. Just get to meetings. I had to work when I was in early recovery, but it wasn't. It wound up not being my career job, if you will. It was a job I needed to pay the bills, that kind of thing. But if I wasn't using, that was a good day. Does that make sense? That was kind of like the victory. I didn't use today. Then something weird happened, maybe around 90 days or 6 months. I can't tell you exactly when it was, but people actually expected me not to use, and now I needed to start doing life. I didn't like that. I preferred getting a parade everywhere because I wasn't getting high, But all of a sudden now I had to do other things, and I had to figure out where do I need to go. In my case, it was to go back to school and do some things along those lines. But there's usually stages, and sometimes people will get stuck in some of those stages. Sometimes people, and it's okay, they just need pushed and they need some support, but they'll get stuck maybe in the recovery stage where they're not working. This happens a lot with young people. Do I go? Here's a big question that comes up. Do I go back to school or not? Yes.
Like my dad was saying, 'cause, I had a backslide and then got real sick and was in the hospital, and it started out, everybody was telling me they just wanted me to focus on getting better, doing what I need to do to get back up, to where I could take those steps. Like with the work thing, it wasn't, you have to go back to work, It was, you feel like you're ready to go back to work. And there was a line where when I did go back to work, it was not going to be where I was at before. I had to transfer and make some changes on that part. To where it all kind of worked together. So we sat down and it wasn't like a push or, you have a deadline, but there was some things that had to be met along that line to keep myself.
Yeah, there's a basic process to it, guys, that has to do with an ability or a willingness to talk about this stuff and bring it up along the way, and the person in recovery needs to be receptive to the conversation and try not to be defensive, and the family has to be patient as they're going through this. Again, you got to remember, this is my philosophy on how to do this recovery thing. A lot of other folks would say, don't do it this way. The family should go over here and take care of themselves. The person in recovery should go over here and take care of themselves, and they should stay out of each other's business. I just don't buy that. That doesn't make sense to me. I think it's better that you guys are in this room, and I think it's okay for you to know what's going on with your loved one's recovery, and I think communication is necessary and appropriate, whether the person is 16 years old or 56 years old, whatever the case may be. If we believe that addiction is a disease, then it's very natural for the family to want to know what's going on and kind of check in. If I had cancer and I went to the doctor, my wife would be like, what happened? How did it go? What did they say? My mom would be like, what happened? How did it go? What did they say? And I might be worried about what I was going through, and I might be a little bit short with them, but I'm not going to get defensive that they want to know how I'm doing. Where do you run into trouble? You run into trouble when the communication process breaks down. When the communication process becomes a problem in and of itself. And how does that happen? Well, the person in, what's that?
Nag.
Okay, so on the family end, you can nag. You can go, there's a fine line between inquiry and inquisition. You can kind of cross that line. That's where it can go wrong on the family end. Where can it go wrong on the person in recovery end? We can get defensive. People in recovery do get defensive. And now I've often said, if we're getting too defensive, it might be because we're doing something. We're up to something, right? I mean, when I'm doing well, I want people to ask me how I'm doing because I'm going to tell you how wonderful I'm doing. So you have to wonder, why are people getting defensive? But that's where it breaks down. And then what happens? Boom, you start clashing. Voices start to get raised. An argument ensues. And then you stop talking altogether, and now neither one knows what's going on. So remember, on the family end, the word nagging is kind of like, it comes with a negative connotation. So I want to figure out a different way to say that. Try to make sure you do not become overly committed to investigation. All right? Try to make sure that you do not become overly committed to investigation. And some of you may be more prone to that than others. And if you are prone to over-investigation, then what you want to do is you sort of want to check yourself. And again, there's not a lot of us in recovery here, but I would share with people in recovery, try not to become defensive. It's just a question. It's just a conversation. Okay? And then I also want to encourage people to understand that there usually is a process of different stages of recovery where boundaries may need to be redefined around things like living arrangements, even if the person's doing well, around school or around work, even if the person's doing well. The boundaries aren't always going to be related to don't get high, go to meetings. Does that make sense? They can take on all kinds of different forms. Yes?
Is there in your professional opinion, when someone's coming out of a recovery center and working on their recovery at home, is there a time that you should wait before you encourage them to get a job?
It's a great question. So the question is, how long do you wait until you encourage people to get jobs? You know, I feel like that's probably very, very individualized for folks, and I don't know that there's an easy way to say that. A lot of people say early on, let them focus on their recovery. Mm-hmm. Just let them focus on their recovery. Encourage them to focus on going to meetings. Encourage them on, but 90 days, you maybe start having that conversation. You'll see a lot of people will get back into the workforce usually through a different type of job than maybe what they were doing before. They'll kind of ease into some kind of, maybe they get into some industry or some type of work that they aren't necessarily interested in making that their career. Low stress, just to get back into a good routine. And then they ease back into whether it's going to school or what it might be. Yeah. Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
I was going to say, I think sometimes when they're active, words and emotions take over and we say things we shouldn't. And I think in recovery, you need to make sure that you realize this is a person with feelings. Yeah. And they're scared. And we just need to be respectful and think about, how I'm asking this, how would it come across to me?
It's a great point. It's a great point. So, and it's not judging anybody who's made a mistake in this area. These are very highly emotionally charged situations that you're in. This is dangerous stuff that you're dealing with, and you're worried, and so you are definitely prone. I mean, you're not robots. You're gonna make mistakes, and you're gonna say things that you wish you wouldn't. Has anybody ever said anything that come out of their mouth you wish, oh my gosh, I wish I had a rewind button that I could just pull that back? And it can be mean things, it can be belittling things. You got to remember, whenever you are in this conversation, you're also going to be driven by emotion. That emotional part of our brain, rather than the thinking part of our brain, will take over, and you can become, very defensive. That's why I say, trying to be conscious of where, when, and how. Where do you have the conversation? And I literally mean, what's the physical setting? Kitchen table, outside on the back deck. Maybe you go for a drive. You know that about your family. Where do you have the setting? When? Morning. A lot of people think you have the best conversations in the morning. You definitely don't want to do it when the person's loaded. Right? I don't know if anybody in here knows how to translate. I used to speak fluent drunk. I used to speak that very well. I can no longer speak that. I've lost that ability. I've been out of that country for so long that I forget how to do it. So you don't want to talk to the person whenever they're under the influence. And then the how part is obviously trying to stay calm, trying to just express your feelings, talk to them, not accusations. the finger pointing. And it's not that I'm trying to give people a break. I'm not trying to make it okay what we do when we're in active addiction. This is for you guys. You're trying to advance the needle, right? You're trying to get the person further toward recovery. Arguing and yelling and saying those things, that doesn't get it done. That doesn't get it done. Yes, ma'am.
I was just going to say, too, it helped because, you know, I had been going to meetings and doing it for a couple of years. So when they would ask me about the meetings and what was going on, and you know, at first I was like, almost like I felt, like you said, like they were accusing me or questioning me to death, but then I have to look at it like they don't know anything about it, like how it works or anything, because I know when friends were going to meetings, I was like, well, what are y'all doing?
Yeah.
You know, so to turn around and look at it, and then I was glad that they wanted to know what was going on. It was different for me because I never really had, you know, it would be like, oh, how was it? Okay, cool, and that was it instead. But you know.
Yeah, so it's kind of like how can you get behind the curtain and see really what's going on? It's a great point. I don't know. Does anyone want to know what happens at meetings? Now, there's certain things I can't tell you. There are certain super secret handshakes and stuff like that. Yeah, and no, it's the simplest thing in the world, guys. It's kind of what we're doing here tonight. It's the idea of recovery meeting, no matter what type of recovery meeting it is, whether it's a 12-step recovery meeting or a favor recovery meeting or a celebrate recovery meeting. It's the same general idea of shared experience and mutual support. So you go, they're usually an hour long, and you're literally sharing your experience around this, and you kind of are getting support from one another to not use and to kind of like try to lead a peaceful life and try to find some serenity in your life. And again, in 12-step rooms, they've emphasized 12-step recovery, and our SMART recovery meetings, we emphasize more of a cognitive behavioral approach. The details might be a little bit different, but it's the same general idea of what we're doing here.
I just want to mention that if you have not been to one of the noon meetings here, they're phenomenal. And it really lets you see the other side.
Yeah.
And it's just a growing experience.
Yeah.
And you learn to see how these people are fighting, and they're growing, and you're excited for them. And
yeah, the meetings are very hopeful. Also, the other part of it that you want to keep in mind is you might have your loved one may be finding this through different means too. They may be doing individual work as well. Like a lot of folks go see a therapist, or they'll go do group therapy and that type of thing. And whatever it is, whatever their pathway is, I feel like it's okay for you guys to be left in on it and see what's happening. Not necessarily witness what's happening, because some of those environments you won't be able to witness. But, you know, asking questions. Again, I do want to caution, though, this is where it does get tough, because I know sometimes, let's just take therapy, for example. I have a private practice, and I do very, very small amount. I really don't get to do too much at all anymore. But a lot of times, families would want to know exactly what we were talking about in therapy. They would want to know from their loved one exactly what was being talked about. That was sort of crossing the line. Do you follow me? I've noticed that people get very defensive in those situations, which is different than I went to a meeting today and we talked about people, places, and things. That is a little bit of a different feel than I went to see Rich today. Oh, what did you guys cover? You get where I'm coming from? There's something about individual therapy that's a little bit more intimate that may make it a little bit harder to share about. So you might want to be cautious, or you might want to think about that. I've talked about this already. These are just things these tend to be some of the boundary violations that are just over the top and will usually get family members moving right away. This is the type of stuff that kind of can push you to another level. And if you weren't setting boundaries, you're probably thinking about it if people are doing this. Stealing property, right? That's happened before. People have taken your stuff. Threatening, physically attacking. I put this up here, taking advantage or manipulation. I know people who are more angry about this than they are this. they can deal with the fact that something got stolen, but this idea of the continuous lying and manipulation has been a theme that comes up a lot when I've talked to parents and I've talked to families. They just look you in the eye, and I was capable of doing this, look you in the eye and tell you, that you didn't, what you just saw, you didn't see. And the lying and the manipulation can drive you crazy as a family member. And it can really, first of all, it can make you question your own sanity. It'll make you question whether or not, really, am I overreacting to this? Is this, maybe this isn't a big deal. Maybe I'm making too much out of this, that kind of thing. That's a tough one there. And a lot of people need to have very strong boundaries around the manipulation part of it. I'm going to speak for myself. I got into recovery. I had to be absolutely 100% on point with my wife. Where I said I was going to be, I needed to be there. There could be no lying, no manipulation. There was no such thing as even a white lie. You follow me? It was rigorous honesty, over-the-top honesty. That was her area of, I don't know what you want to call it, her hot button issue, if you will. That was a big, huge red flag in my family, was how dishonest when I was using. And it was stuff that in my mind I didn't even necessarily think I was actually being dishonest about. But it really, that cut deep. That cut deep. And that's where you guys just need to be honest and communicate and know what it is for you guys. Can anybody relate to the lying and manipulation part of it? That's the part that really gets you fired up. That's the part that gets you fired up. And I think that those are the type of conversations that if your loved one who's in recovery or working toward recovery can understand that can help. And how do they find out about it? They need to talk about this at meetings. They need to come to meetings and they need to say, my family doesn't trust me. So that we can say, yes, why would they? Why would they trust you? Do you follow me? It's going to be hard for you guys to get them in touch with this, but they need to understand you have to earn trust. You have to earn trust with actions over time. And what that means is that's by being in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing over and over and over again, eventually people will start to trust you. But you guys are not insane. Whenever you question yourself around something happening, if I'm making all this up, but if your loved one is going to a meeting and he was supposed to be home at 8 o'clock and it's 9:30 and he's not home yet, that doesn't mean he's getting high, but it's okay for you guys to go into that feeling that you get. You know the feeling I'm talking about? The little bit of panic, the little bit of worry, the little bit of questioning. Why didn't you call me? Why didn't you text? And if I was coaching your loved one, I would tell you to go over the top with communication with your family. Text them if you're going to be late. I was in Pennsylvania last week, and I got to spend a lot of time with my mom because my kids, I have young kids, they weren't there. We weren't chasing kids around all the time. It was just me and my mom. In between conferences and stuff like that, I was speaking at a bunch of different places in Pennsylvania. And so, man, that was really, really kind of cool, because when I'm with my mom now, it is because of this group. It's because of you guys. I often sit there with my mom and I literally say to myself, what the hell was it like raising me? Because I hear you guys talk, and a lot of moms in here, and I'm like, what must that have been like? And the uncertainty and it was easier in a way for my mom, though, because when I would leave on a Friday afternoon and be gone until Monday afternoon, there was no way for her to get a hold of me. There was no constant communication. So she had no choice. I think that's why the term let go and let God worked better back in the day, because there was no way to check on me. There was no occasionally, if I was at somebody's house, she could call and say, hey, is Rich there? But for the most part, it was out of sight, out of mind. So there was this, she had to constantly work on this detachment. She had to constantly work on these issues. And she went through it with me and my brother. She went through it with me and my brother. And we talk a lot about it. And I realized in early recovery, I never really realized that she did this, But what she did was she didn't have alcohol around me. She would never have alcohol around me. It wasn't until about, and I never told her not to. I remember talking to my sponsor about how to handle parties at my mom's house, if there was going to be alcohol and things like that. And he said, that's not your mom's problem, that's your problem. If you don't want to go, you don't go. And it was probably about 18 months down the road that she started having alcohol and stuff like that back in. And you know, her awareness and her involvement and her support of my recovery goes way beyond what I was even aware of. I was never really even aware of how invested she was in that process, because I was really focused more on what was going on with me and my wife, you know. But it's really interesting to talk about how what it was like for her to deal with this and get her perspective on it as the person who kind of like put her through that. And my family, man, I'll tell you, my family, it's just it's heartbreaking. We are just, you know, it's like work hard, play hard. If you're doing well and you got a business, then everything's fine, man. Do it. And it's just like, it's destroying us. It's destroying us. And you know what it is? It's alcohol. It's not heroin. It's not pills. It's alcohol. It's a socially acceptable drug of alcohol is just ripping us apart. And so, but we can talk about it. Whenever I was in the middle of it, we wouldn't talk about it. We would yell about it. We would fight about it. I would say the things that you guys have probably been told. I would say I had like go-to lines. You're crazy. You need help. Has anybody in here been told that? Like literally, I'm the one who just got done stealing the savings bonds and cashing them in early. You found out that I was doing that, and you're upset with me about that, but somehow you're the crazy one, and you need help. Those were the type of things that, and look guys, I'm a relatively sane person. I mean, look at me. You see me now. I mean, I'm a pretty normal guy, right? Relatively well. Thank you, Carol. I mean, my point being is I came from, I mean, the baseline Rich is not that type of person. Does that make sense? That's not at all who I am. I'm not a liar. I don't do that. I love my mom. I don't want to be like that toward people. But if you put a chemical into me and I go back on that plane, I go back on that path, holy cow. I'm capable of things that I can't even make sense of. And so I'm sharing that with you guys to try to get you to understand exactly, like, whenever you're frustrated and when you're dealing with this, know that you really are dealing with a hijacked brain. And again, it's not to make excuses for anyone. You have to set your boundaries, and you have to say what you mean what you say, but don't say it mean. But you're dealing with a hijacked brain. You're not dealing with your kid. Carol?
In that situation that you said where the person stole from you and you're angry at them for doing that, but they turn it around that you're the one that's wrong because you're angry about it.
Yeah.
How do you respond to that?
I think you have to pull yourself out of that conversation. If somebody says that to you, you have got to, right in that moment, realize that I am dealing with a person who's 100% irrational. I'm going to leave now. We'll talk about this tomorrow. You follow me? You're way in deep. If you're talking to somebody who's capable of looking at you and blaming you for the fact that they stole your money, then you should literally say to yourself, danger, 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 I'm out. There's nothing good going to come out of the rest of this conversation. I'm going to get frustrated. I'm going to say stuff to you. You're going to get angry. You're clearly in no frame of mind. You're never, ever going to talk a drug addict, an active addict, into like an epiphany. It does not exist. I've tried. I'm a trained professional and I can't do it. You're not going to have this conversation and they're going to be saying, you don't understand. It was actually my money anyway because you were supposed to give that to me for my birthday. And I was 12 years old and you got Johnny a Nintendo and I got an Atari. Everyone knows that Pong sucks. And you guys even know what that is? Atari and Nintendo? You don't even know what it is. Holy hell. Good God. They're like the first video games, dude. Those are like the first video games. If you're in a situation like that and people start talking that way, you have to just say to yourself, I'm out. I'm out. I'm not going to participate in this. I'm not going to have this conversation. I'm not going to, because you're never going to get that person to all of a sudden say, yep, you know what, Mom, you're right.
We'll probably pass out.
Yes.
I've had some parents that I counsel and work with, the recovery coach, say to me that they'll try to pull themselves out of those conversations, but their loved ones will stalk them or taunt and chase them around the house and harass them, and short of, getting in the car and leaving.
Yeah, there's a weird thing goes on, guys, and I'll let you know about this. What's happening in that situation, Suzanne, what Suzanne said is that even sometimes when the family tries to pull out, the person will chase them around. What's going on is that's actually like the person is internally conflicted on their own behavior, and they're looking for their family to make it better. Do you follow me? So let's say I just stole some money out of your purse. You're confronting me. I start saying silly things, and you go to walk away. I'm going after you because I feel so bad about it that I want you to say something and literally like take it away. It's a really, really strange dynamic. It's called cognitive dissonance. I'm in that moment realizing exactly how shady and slimy the behavior was, and I can't deal with the fact that you're leaving because that's going to make me have to think about it. That's going to make me feel bad. So if you guys are able to get in the car and drive away in a situation like that and not say another word, it could have deep impact. I've shared in the group before that New Year's Eve 2000, whenever I got in that car accident and stuff, and when I drove home, my wife wouldn't argue with me. I couldn't get my wife to argue with me. I couldn't get her to tell me that I had a problem. I couldn't get her to tell me that she was tired of this. And where I almost argued with myself on the way back because I was so uncomfortable with her silence. Silence speaks volumes sometimes, especially if your loved one is used to you kind of banging away at them, right? Let's say that the dynamic is you're very used to, hey, Rich, knock that off. Who do you think you are? You can't do that. And all of a sudden you're looking at him, you're saying, or even if you say something like, this makes me so sad, and you walk away, it can blow it'll blow my mind. I'll be like, what the hell? Come talk to me, fight with me, anything other than this. But you might have to leave the house to get that done.
Well, these are also instances where they want the parents to give them something, and they keep badgering.
Well, that's different. That's different. That's just straight up. That's the equivalent of a kid throwing a fit in Toys R Us. Yes, but except it's a bigger kid with better words and more skills, right? Than my 4-year-old throwing a fit. And so what do? You got to get away from that situation. You got to get away, and you also have to go back. And I know this is so easy for me to say, guys. But if you're in a situation where that's going on and the person becomes threatening and the person starts punching walls and the person starts throwing fits, you got to call the police. And I would call the police over and over and over again. If they get to that level. Do you follow me? Because what I'm thinking is sometimes people even try to walk away and the person can almost become threatening. That's some of the stuff that I've heard. And if that happens, then you do have to call the authorities. That kind of thing. What other questions or comments about boundaries? Yes.
This happened at my house. I can see it. It's been several years ago, but I can still see it. My daughter and her boyfriend came over, and we're talking to my husband in the garage. And I came home unexpectedly and came in from the upstairs and heard my jewelry box close.
Yeah.
And called my daughter. Thought she was in the house. I followed her out to the garage. I had looked in my jewelry box and things were gone.
Yeah.
And I said, you took my jewelry.
Right.
And she said, how dare you say that?
Right.
How dare you?
Yeah.
And my husband, standing there, was like, but she was here. I said, no, she was upstairs.
Yeah, don't you think, I mean...
She was trying to manipulate us, and, my husband was like, to me,
Yeah.
are you sure that's what she did?
No, it'll get you, if you're not careful, you will start to question your own version of reality. You will start to question your own sanity. You will literally start to think, did I actually see what I think I saw? You know?
What was bad was that he was questioning.
Yeah, that happens a lot. That happens a lot between couples. Yes, sir.
Our son was just one day short of 5 months of staying clean. And he was about a month out of ankle reconstruction surgery. And because of all the painkillers they put him on, and he wasn't a pill junkie. But because he was on so much of that, it caused him to really start having problems with cravings, and eventually he relapsed. Well, we're kind of on the back end of that now. You know, we hopefully we hit the pinnacle of the problem when we're on the downside. And then we just found out he's going to have to go get evaluated for a heart surgery.
Wow.
So how do we're going to have to do some examination of how we're going to do boundaries, because he's going to go through this cycle again.
So remember, it's a good question. So we're talking about physical health issues. And remember at the beginning when I talked about individualized situations. This is where everything I'm talking about tonight, I'm trying to talk in generalities. You got to take a look at your specific situation, and you may not be able to do certain things, or you're going to have to adjust based on what you're going through and based on what you're dealing with, on where you set boundaries and how you handle that. Now, he can learn from his previous experience with these pills. Yeah. He can learn. Here's another thing, and this doesn't just apply to you guys. I would encourage everyone in the room to think about it. This is where actually having like a recovery group can help, because we can help him better than you guys can help him. And so if you could get him back here, because he could talk about that experience he's talking about with surgery, believe it or not, isn't as uncommon as you might think. What he went through there that you described is actually, unfortunately, kind of right out of a relapse playbook. That happens, that type of scenario. So we would have a lot of experience that we could offer him.
He has a promise to start coming back tomorrow.
Okay, good. Good.
I had a specific problem with my daughter last year. She was opiate, she was a heroin addict, was clean for 4 years, had to have open heart surgery. So we talked to the doctors. I'm Carol Kane, you can get my number from favor. I can tell you what we do. We got a pain management doctor involved ahead of time.
Yeah.
And so she was able to get through the surgery.
You got to be proactive.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, you really need to talk to your doctors about it and lay it out, and they can plan for that.
All right.
And GHS is doing a good job. At least they do with my daughter.
All right. All right, guys. So I got to shift gears on us because we're almost done here, and I want to go. Did you have something, ma'am?
I wanted to know, I know we're running out of time, if you could talk a little bit about the whole detachment thing, like what that feels like, what doesn't feel like.
So detachment is the idea that you're able to pull back and not become emotionally invested in what's going on with your loved one. In other words, whether or not he was having a good day wouldn't impact your emotions quite as much. So you would step back. Some people think it physically means, it doesn't necessarily mean physically detached, it means emotionally detached. And it's one of those things that again, you can say it, it's really easy to say, it's really difficult to do, and there is no formula for doing it. It would take practice, and most people detach over time, to be honest with you, over a long period of time. And I want to say one other thing. Detachment was invented for spouses and husbands. It was invented out of Al-Anon, and Al-Anon was a group for wives of alcoholics. And detachment for my wife, to me, was a hell of a lot easier than it would have been from her to my son. It's very unnatural, especially for moms, to detach from their kids. It's very unnatural.
I like to explain detachment as being a measured response as opposed to an emotional reaction.
Yeah, that's legit, but it takes a lot of practice.
Yes.
And don't be hard on yourself if you're having trouble detaching. Some people would say that when we stand up in front of here and we ask parents, especially moms, to detach, that it's a completely unnatural thing that we're asking you to do. So, all right, so I want to go over this. This is a brand new program that Favor Greenville is offering. And it's called Operation Rescue, hence the cards with the words Operation Rescue on them. And it's meant for people, it's meant for any age. If the person is using opioids of any kind, pain pills or heroin especially, you can call and sign them up for services with or without their consent. We will cold call them regularly, like 2-3 times a week, and check in with them. And it's meant to try to keep people engaged in recovery, especially where some of these dangerous drugs are concerned. This program was developed because we've lost some folks along the way, as we all know. And we know that we're living in very dangerous times with some of these drugs. So how it would work, guys, is there's a number on here. You would simply call this number. This is a whole separate hotline than the favor desk, and you would give us your loved one's name and number. You talk it through with the person on the other line, and you tell them, this is what we got going on. He's not going to meetings. We haven't seen him. We're not sure where he is. He won't go see his therapist. Or he's in the basement and he won't come out of the basement. And we will start calling them and texting them. So I'm going to leave these cards up here, and you can grab these and take these with you. Or if you know anyone dealing with this, if you have a neighbor dealing with this issue, this is a 24-hour hotline that they can call. Any questions about Operation Rescue?
Does the person have to be in this seat?
Not if you're here. You got that? Because you're our customer too. Anyone else have any questions?
It's only heroin and opioids?
Yeah, that's what we're starting with. We'll open it up to other things down the road, but we want to start. What we're trying to do is do anything and everything we can to get these guys on the phone and say, dude, do you realize what you're doing? Are you sure you know what you're doing? Do you know that you're dealing with Frankenstein drugs? It's not even heroin anymore, guys. I've been in this field professionally for 16 years, and I can tell you that we're not even dealing with heroin. That's what everyone, they got to quit calling it heroin. It's not heroin. Heroin killed less than 10,000 people, and 10,000 deaths are too many. But 66,000, it's not heroin. It's fentanyl and carfentanil. And we want people to know what's happening, and we're going to call them, we're going to text them, and we will assertively take responsibility for the relationship. And you don't have to do anything. They don't have to even agree to the phone call. We will cold call them. All right? Any questions? All right, I'm going to leave these cards up here. Take these if you need them, and take them and pass them on if anyone else in your back pocket, if they're doing well and you want to hold on to for future reference. All right, guys. Well, this was outstanding, incredibly enlightening, fun group tonight, right? It was pretty good. Pretty good. Thank you. Thank you. Next week, we will talk further about the evolution of gaming systems. Somebody bring the Atari. But if we can get a moment, can we please close with the Serenity Prayer? I get a moment of silence for those still suffering with this disease and for the family members brought into it no choice of their own. Followed by the Serenity Prayer. God, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. All right, guys. These cards are sitting right here if you're looking for them. And you don't have to do anything other